Hello, this is Yehna.
And this is Jessie.
We are excited to be back with another episode. We wrestled through many different questions. We wanted to invite you and elaborate more on the question how to change the mindset of wanting more than a 9 to 5, specifically as a missionary kid. So, welcome and join us at
At the
the
table.
table. At
We do
this
this
point,
every week.
I know. At this point, you're just the laugh is part of our intro, I think.
Why have we not gotten it by now?
No, it's like, okay, one, two, three. Anyways.
So, not gonna lie, this episode is very controversial and spicy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I, whew, I am ready to talk about this, but I'm definitely sweating. I'm definitely a little uncomfortable. But I think it's so important to open this dialogue. And I feel like it's a conversation that both missionary kids and non missionary kids can participate in. Yeah, we're talking about if there is more to just a 9 to 5. And especially as missionary kids, where we have not grown up in a culture of having parents with a 9 to 5, like what does that look like as we are a part of that culture now?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to share where we were with that thinking and in terms of what we thought of that lifestyle of a 9 to 5, what kind of mindset we hope to have as we approach it from a missionary kid's perspective, and then what are the things that we continue to wrestle with as we
Mm-hmm.
are a part of that culture, which is so weird to think because that is the majority of, our society.
It's so true.
But we weren't a part of that for all of our lives until now. So let's unpack this. Oh, Yenna, can you start us off by kind of explaining the tension that we feel
Mm-hmm.
as we talk about, okay, what does it mean to live a 9 to 5 as a missionary kid?
Yes. So basically, the tension is me wanting to preface this episode to say, and Jesse literally said, we're in it. So we're not here to be bashing 9 to 5, say this is the worst way to live. No, obviously, we've been doing this for 3, 5 years, but what we really want to do is to wrestle through just that concept of, oh my goodness, we've never had this culture. We've never grew up with the 9 to 5, even with, at least for me, within my community, I didn't have
Mm,
anyone who was a part of a 9 to 5 at that point in my life. So now that I'm in it, I find myself really going back and forth, seesawing back and forth of, okay, is a 9 to 5 the end all be all? Or do I need to live this quote unquote radical mission life? And what does that even mean for myself? And it's actually recently, I was telling Jesse this, I was talking kind of with my brother about that because he wants to go into a 9 to 5. He wants to pursue an engineering kind of company and just, have that simple lifestyle. But then he's really stumped on the question of, am I allowed to want that? And it was
mm,
so interesting hearing him think that way because, unlike Jesse and I, he doesn't care too much about how other people perceive him because, which is awesome, pretty freeing. But it was just so intriguing to hear his missionary kid point of view because I was
mm.
thinking, oh my goodness, I guess this is a pretty not a common, or it could stem from having that missionary kid background. So it was something that just popped into my head as we were questioning and wrestling through this question. Sorry,
Hmm.
that was really long, but kind of wanted to preface it.
No, I appreciate you for doing that. And the thing is, if you are a missionary kid listening to this and you're like, didn't really think about that, to be honest, didn't really, that was in the past and that was my childhood. And now I'm fully immersed in this life and I'm just going to run with it and I want to run with it. That's awesome. If you haven't thought twice about it, that's awesome. I think it's just been on our hearts, both Yana and I. It's been weighing on our hearts a lot. And so,
Mhm.
and we'll explain a little bit why that has been. Just to kind of reiterate what Yana said, growing up as missionary kids and having parents that were living that and chose that radical lifestyle of, and we grew up watching our parents be appreciated, prayed over, admired for the sacrifice or
Mhm.
lifestyle that they chose to live. And now being out of that, it feels strange that that isn't our lifestyle anymore. But on top of that, that we chose intentionally not to be a part of that.
Mm.
anymore or as of now,
Yeah.
right? God hasn't called us to that season yet.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't know if that yet's coming. We don't know, right?
Right.
So I think that's where the tension comes from of feeling, well, I feel like we know what that looks like. And so shouldn't we want that or shouldn't we be doing something now to pursue that?
Mm-hmm.
And if we are not, is that okay? The reason why it weighs on our hearts is because, I mean, Yehna and I are both SPED teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And not gonna lie, as much as we know this is a specific niche calling, as much as the kids do need us, it's funny because we equally need SPED to kind of fulfill that piece of serving or sacrificing or being needed for something bigger than ourselves, which I hate admitting. Okay, Yana, you take over because I'm kind of feeling uncomfortable right now.
I mean, obviously, there it's not
Yeah.
just this one aspect that we wrestle with when it comes to special ed. There's, I mean, you've heard our teacher rants. There's just a myriad of things that occupy our mind. But it is true. The confession is we can't find ourselves mm, moving forward to a different career out of SPED, even if we were quote unquote wanted to, because of guilt. At least for me,
Mm,
because I'm thinking, how dare I don't want to speak for Jessie, but for me, I'm like, how dare I want to live for myself? And I know that's not the
mm,
right way of thinking, but my intrusive thoughts go there. It does. And I hate to admit it, but it does. And that's my confession is like, I'm in SPED because I need to know that I am doing more than living for myself. But that is a prideful way of thinking.
oh, it's getting hot in here. And obviously, that doesn't occupy, at least it doesn't occupy my mind every day. And that's not what drives me. Like, guilt isn't what drives me, but I do think, am I enough if I'm not serving like this? Or am I doing enough if I am not putting in the hard work and actually doing things that quote unquote are helping people
Mm,
tangibly?
right.
And I always think, like, without SPED, what would I think of myself?
Mm,
And it's this like half dipping into, okay, we don't, obviously teachers don't make a lot, but we get a consistent like job security. We
we
get
do.
income. So we're dipping into
Insurance.
that
Yeah.
insurance, right? We're dipping into that, but we're also dipping into like the missionary type serving. So we're
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, well, this kind of works because we have a balance of the 9 to 5 lifestyle and the missionary lifestyle. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
Maybe that's why we're drawn to SPED. I don't know.
Very good question. Now I have to question a million things the moment we get off this call. But I think for me that it's definitely had a 180 shift coming into this year. But even
Mm,
up to the end of last year, guilt was what permeated my mind and my heart.
mm,
How dare I live for myself? How dare I have an opinion of what I want to do in my life? These kids, not okay, I don't want to say all of them. That's so false, but a lot of them don't have that option. And here I am saying, oh my God, I am just living such a hard life. So I'm going to try to do something that makes me quote unquote happy. How dare I? And that
mm,
really got to me. And of course, that's
mm.
not going to take me anywhere. I'm going to feel burnt out. I'm going to feel bitter. I'm going to be pretty depressed. That's why I think we rarely wrestle with the special education world sometimes, outside of a million other things. But when it comes to this
Mm.
question of career, yeah.
Yeah. And we're not saying, oh, just because you have a corporate job or you work at a cafe, that you're living for yourself and that you're living a selfish lifestyle.
No.
Like, that is not what we're saying. We're just saying, coming from a missionary kid environment, a 9 to 5, from our perspective, just feels so far from living for Jesus.
Mm,
And it feels quote unquote unfulfilling. And I'm sure
yeah,
even if you don't have a missionary kid lifestyle or background, you probably are thinking, like, is my 9 to 5 really what God wants me to do? Like, is
exactly.
my 9 to 5 fulfilling? Do I feel like I am living out my calling
Mm,
and living out my vocation and using my spiritual gifts to fully be the hands and feet of Jesus? I don't know. You probably think that too. And I
mm-hmm.
guess we're just really wrestling with it because we have grown up experiencing our parents not live that 9 to 5 lifestyle. So
Right.
that's what's
Yeah.
tricky.
And I
It just,
think,
yeah,
sorry,
go for
not to
it.
cut you off, even just in our early 20s and this generation, that's a big question. I'm just seeing as a trend is wanting to live a quote unquote fulfilling life. And this is outside of biblical standpoint. This is just kind of seeing the trend I'm seeing within our generation is that we're asking, do we really have to live a robot life? You know, wake up, eat, work, eating, sleeping, and repeat. Do we have to
Mhm.
work for another person? I see this question, whether it was directly said or indirectly portrayed, it's a circulating question within our generation. I can see how this has an overlap with our missionary kids' perspective. So, like,
Mm.
layers and layers of questions of, am I allowed to be wrestling with this question? But I know I should be, because I should be thinking of how to grow in Christ. But then I'm also thinking, am I allowed to be quote unquote happy with the way I'm living? Or am I
Mm.
being selfish? You know, there's so many questions.
Yeah. And within being a part of this 9 to 5 culture, we've had to do a lot of mindset shifting. And we're still in the process of really getting over that whole quote unquote guilt or
Yeah.
being okay with being where we're at. And I think that's why Yana and I both go to the churches that we go to, because they are huge advocates for church starts on Monday. And
Mm-hmm.
by that, it means that, okay, we're just not here on Sunday to proclaim God's name and worship on Sunday. We're here to do that from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all the days of the week, because we need to be God's hands and feet wherever we're placed.
Mm.
And that is so inspiring to me because it's kind of merging that too, right? Of, oh, I don't have to go abroad and be a missionary to do missional work.
Mm-hmm.
I can be in the suburbs, literally be surrounded by all 9 to 5 people, and still have people that are challenging me to live missionally where I'm at. And so I think that's very inspiring and refreshing because
Yeah.
that's not something that you experience in a church a lot. And with that being said, I think it's more of that perspective of we need to be open to being used by God everywhere. And it doesn't have to look like this outward radical mission setting that we grew
Mm-hmm.
up in.
Yeah.
I'm always thinking, oh, God, eventually, if you call me to be a missionary in my 30s, then I will start live like then I can fully live for you. And then I'm living my purpose. And it's like, no,
Right.
Jess, you are being placed now. How are you living differently now? How do you proclaim the gospel where you are now? It's
Which,
not a later thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep cutting you off. It's like
No,
my
no.
brain is running at 100 miles per hour. But when you were saying that, that literally reminded me of my dad's story. He got this calling. He was working a 9 to 5. He was going to church, serving basically. And basically, what happened was he was working in the children's ministry, but they came up to him and was like, "You're really not doing much here. I don't know what you're doing." And at this point, I think my dad was also going through kind of like a season of not frustration, but a lot of questioning of like, God, like, why aren't you opening doors? You're giving me this
Mm,
calling, but why aren't you opening doors? And so, long story short, he started to pray regularly and actually start planning and checking on these kids and serving side by side from this 9 to 5. And what he learned from this was, how am I to be used in his so-called calling if I'm not obedient to the small things that God calls me to do? Like, how am I supposed to do
mm,
this big, specific calling if I'm not even able to commit to and be obedient to this so-called generic calling that he calls me
mm.
to do every single day, which is to be obedient and love Christ with all his heart, mind, and soul and strength. So I'm feeling a little convicted. uh,
Yeah, the question for you guys is how are you living differently? It starts now, right?
mhm.
It's not a, oh, when I'm mature enough, or oh, when I finally quit this job that I know I'm not called to. No, how are you living a separated life now
Mhm.
from others where they know that you're different, where they know that they see something in you? But we're going to share what we continue to wrestle with. I mean, we already shared a lot of the tension that we feel with this, but Yana, what's something that you are continuing to work through as you realize that, yeah, God is still calling you to this 9 to 5 lifestyle as of now?
Mhm. Obviously, not obviously, I kind of mentioned that there was a 180 shift, but even within that 180 shift of mindset, being in the job I'm in right now, there are days where I'm going back to the question of, there needs to be more. There should be more than this. I hate that I wrestle with that still, but that question still pops up in my mind, and I still wrestle with that to this day, thinking like, it shouldn't be this hard. But at the same time, I know if I were to choose any career, it still is going to be with human people relations. And I'm knowing more and more each day. It's not about where and what, it's about how and
Mm,
the why. And so, which
mm,
is that hopefully they will feel God's love through me. And that doesn't have to do with a career. I just hope that that is how anybody who comes in contact with me feels. Really holding fast to that. Again, to be very blatant, I still wrestle sometimes at night at 2 a.m. wide awake. God, there needs to be more than this.
mm.
So it's the back and forth.
And I think it's okay to wrestle with that. And by you wrestling with that, Yana, I don't think you're saying like, oh, my life now isn't significant or my life
Mm-hmm.
now, like that's not what you mean
Right.
by, oh, what is there more? I think you're just wanting to be challenged and to fully live out what God's wanting you to do,
Yeah.
to use your gifts for you to be with people, to do what you're good at, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. But yeah, ultimately, it's like, how are we doing the small things? How are we faithfully living out our lives in the smallest ways? And it's not through a career, it's through a lifestyle. And I also wanted to say, for example, if you were a missionary for maybe 2 years and decided to not choose that life anymore, I wonder if you're feeling guilt, or I wonder if you're feeling like, oof, I wasn't cut out for that, or oh, now
Mm,
I'm just not, I'm just quote unquote normal. You know,
mm,
like I'm sure, because that's how I felt. I'm like, wow, I'm not special anymore being a missionary kid. I'm just normal. And normal is not less. And
yes.
that's what I think that's what I'm wrestling with. Why do I see this culture that's the majority of our society? Why do I see that as normal or less? That's not how it is. And that's
No.
not how it should be. Just because it's not stimulating or not this huge radical thing doesn't
Right.
mean that that's not what God is calling me to or that I should pursue.
It
Anything else to add?
no, because at this point, it's an ongoing wrestling. I think the reason why it's so difficult for me right now is I literally cried about it Wednesday. There's no way that I need to be doing this. I'm like, God, I want to be happy, but I know that's selfish. But I also know that you're gonna give me the joy only you can give, but I don't know what that looks like. I think the reason why
Aw.
I don't know how to keep going, or whoa, not that was phrased wrong. What I meant by why I still wrestle with this is because as much as I'm a feeler, I like my logical, practical things. And I'm having a hard time seeing it practically in front of me played out. That's why I'm wrestling with it, because it's real time,
Mm,
actual real time. That's the point of our podcast, is that we want to show more and more, not just like our missionary background, but really our early 20s, that we have nothing figured out, and but God
mm,
still loves us. When I was being prayed over, the lady that was praying for me was like, nothing's ever too heavy for Jesus, and
mm,
nothing's ever too stupid for him. So you keep asking those angry questions, and he is
mm,
right there to listen. And
mm,
that was so, I needed that reminder. I know it. I grew up hearing it, but I needed that reminder. Just like King David was like raising his fist in the air saying, how dare you, God? You can do the same. God called David a man after his own heart. So
mm.
be like David. A rant. Just kidding. To Jesus.
No, but Yenna, I do feel like, yeah, you are in a season of fully lamenting and letting
Mm,
yourself lament and not feeling guilty for that, because I think that's something that maybe you might have wrestled with is
mm.
because it's been bottled up for so long. So, come as you are. Our
Yeah.
podcast fam is here to embrace you in all the seasons that each of us
Mm,
are in.
yes.
And thank you for being real.
Thank you for listening.
Right.
Yes.
Mm.
The mumble jumble. I love it.
Whew.
Anyway, I always don't know how to end these things because we literally don't ever end these things with a conclusion. So it's always like, okay, guys, so
I think we've talked about it enough.
no.
Okay, time to end.
Moving on. But really, moving on. Thank you for listening to this. And I really hope, I say this all the time, but I really hope that this is a reminder and an encouragement to say that you are okay right where you're at. And God is moving you and molding you. You might not see it, but He is. And it might not look the way you want it to, but trusting in Him, also being diligent right where you're at. It's really that. I really hope you guys know you can reach out to us to say, yeah, same. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. We are on Spotify and we're on YouTube to have more of these wonderful brain dumps and rant sessions. We cannot wait to share more on our next episode. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.